Welcome back to another episode of Capes and Tights, a comic book and pop culture podcast with your host, Adam Morissette and Justin Soderbergh. That's me. That's Adam over there. If you're watching the video, if you're listening to the podcast in your car, you can't see us, but no. Adam is quote unquote sitting next to me, 10 minutes from me, but soon to be how many hours away?
Ooh, man, 21 by car, but
I say soon to be, but technically when this airs, you're actually already there. So
in the future, exactly. I won't be here.
How is Illinois? How was the move?
It's great.
Everything
my
went
office
perfect.
here. My office here intentionally looks exactly like the one I had in Maine.
You cut the wall out and brought it with you.
I did. Yeah.
Truck. Yeah, it's
I
all
took a
like
picture. I took a picture of that wall, and now I have a pull down backdrop of that really boring wall. Yep.
And really, I don't know how you do it. You took a picture with a bunch of different comic books on it. Is that what it is? So each time we have a new one, you have to what are we talking about today? I got to put that one.
I have 15 different pull downs. Yeah.
But yeah, so we're going to continue doing this remotely and have some fun with it. But it's Star Wars week here at Capes and Tights, and I think every week should be Star Wars week.
Every week is Star Wars week. I
just felt like it. I think I want to do another small one, not an actual like full on one. I wanted an extra bonus episode in December, if you're down with it, to talk the Star Wars holiday special. I think that is a big one. I think it'd be a fun one. I was trying to fit it into this week, but I was like, it doesn't fit because it's not a holiday season, but like it's necessary. I think we need.
Absolutely.
I think we can talk about it. But today we're talking episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Yeah.
That was an intentional silence. Again, it's funnier on video, but yeah.
Yes.
This is like the moment of the intervention when everybody like, okay, do you want to start or should I start? Or
I think it's telling how many people didn't like episode 1. Okay. Mm-hmm. That they didn't like it. They were frustrated, because I feel like there's a difference between liking something and annoyed that it's not the way that you wanted it to be. Like we talked about in episode 1. We talked about yesterday's episode was episode 1, how we like the hype was all there. So when you hype it up to try to like match 4, 5, and 6 episodes, right, and it didn't meet that, or like what people have a preconceived notion of what they wanted it to be in their head, and now it's not what they wanted. That the first movie made what I say 1.1 billion or something like that. This made 653.8 million, almost 400 million less than episode 1 made.
That's fair.
And that's telling, I would think, right?
Yeah, sure.
No one wanted to go out and see the second movie because of how disappointed they were with the first movie.
Yep.
And here's my question to you, just broadly, Adam.
Yes.
Were they right not going to see this movie?
I mean, they were, but I think your thing, and I agree, I'm 100% with you on this, is like my memory though is like I was jazzed after the first movie. My heart was broken in the second movie. Mm-hmm. So I think maybe in retrospect, some people were like, I hated the first one too. But as we said last week, the first one was fun. Mm-hmm. And I was so excited for the next one. And holy God, I remember leaving the theater going, I wouldn't say I didn't like it because it was Star Wars, but I remember it was the first time I inside, I was like, oh God, that was really not what I expected. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm with you. I love the first one, but this is where it changes.
Yes. And so is Anakin, young Anakin, or is Hayden Christensen Anakin better Anakin in your opinion?
Oh, child Anakin is 100 times better than adult Anakin.
Adult Anakin just makes me thinks of a spoiled teenager.
Yes.
He just treats this like he knows he has disabilities. He knows all this stuff, and he just knows. I don't need your opinion. I don't need your help. I can just do it all on my own. And the truth of the matter is, he couldn't, because he's the guy. He's the reason why your parents wanted you to check in with them when you get out of school, and you didn't go to the seedy alley and hang out with the people that turn you the wrong way. That's him. And that ObiWan was the one saying, no, we should hang out and do something fun like community service. And then the dark side's more like, hey, come towards me, which obviously isn't fully there yet. But like you can tell that this towards the end of this film, where he just is like, you're not going to see the light side, the good side of this thing. He's going to go dark. But yeah,
maybe. Yeah. And that's my whole thing. It's like, yes and no. And then just generally, I don't know what I'm trying to learn here is like my whole feeling with that. So I totally agree with you with that light dark side balance. But man, like, I'm just not sure what it means.
Yeah, exactly. The other things about these things, if you look them back now, and I'm watching this one, is that feeling back in the early 2000s when we were excited to see these things, like when R2D2 comes back on the screen again, you're like, ooh, when C3PO shows up, you're like, ooh, look at this, all like dirty and stuff like that. It brings back some of the nostalgic again from episode 1, but like also from 4, 5, and 6, where you're like, I know where these characters go. And those C3PO and R2D2, and let's see, that's basically it that you see in these movies were also exactly the same, quote unquote, in like same actors and everything in the next movies. All these other movies, Ewan McGregor, Natalie Portman, Hayden Christensen, Samuel L. Jackson, Christopher Lee, all these people are not in the early movies, if that makes any sense. So seeing those characters, like, oh, it's another way that, like, watching Moon Knight or some of these other shows that connect to the MCU, you see them name one small thing, you're like, ooh, I know what that's all about. And that's the same thing with these small pieces of R2D2 and C3PO. Really they're not like hugely effective in these movies. Like, they're not like saving the day every day, but like, you see it, and that way it's another way for you to connect the two movies, all the movies together, is with these droids, which is kind of funny if you think about it. Can we boil it down to that the droids are really the big stars?
Well, and that's what I mean. If you want to go down the rabbit hole of that on the internet, it's actually, it's great. I mean, there's whole fan theories that, like, of course, the stories about C3PO and R2D2, they're in all of them. But there's one great one that I'm not even going to attempt to recreate, but about how it's actually R2 that's the big, like, operative for the rebellion, and that it's really the story of how he saves everybody, which is awesome. But yeah, so I mean, that's really the one big thing that endures through the 3 movies is the droids. Because like I said, it's hard to make a mental connection from Hayden Christensen to what comes later, even. So like, it doesn't feel like a continuity.
And they do get the benefit of the doubt of having Hayden Christensen, who doesn't, I guess he kind of looks like he would be a grown-up version, kind of the grown-up version of but like not really. But also the benefit we get and they get is they could have picked anybody to play him, because you basically see a really old, shrivelly Darth Vader at the end taking his helmet off, in the first original trilogy. But other than that, he's wearing a mask the whole time, so you literally could have gotten anybody. And so they honestly would have been great if they didn't show him taking his helmet off at the end. They could have probably cast a black actor, because a black actor was the voice of Darth Vader. It would have been a fun twist of oh my gosh, we never pictured him, like, because obviously back in when the Star Wars coming out, no one pictured anybody being black, but that's a different story. Is that they could have made Darth Vader a African American. Like, it would have been great, because he voiced by an African American, but they obviously had to go back and pick a Hayden Christensen style person because of the fact that he was white when they took the helmet off. But
and Hayden Christensen is like, he has got, as we've said before, so much flack for this. And my thing with Hayden Christensen is like, it was just the writing. I mean, the dialogue was so bad. So like, blaming Hayden Christensen also, like, I don't know who could have delivered that dialogue seriously. Like you mentioned, it's really like the whiniest teenager dialogue ever. But like, I think that Hayden Christensen, though, I hope they're able to salvage somehow, like, now, because I think he's a great actor.
Yeah, I agree too. And I felt like if you think it down to it, more like breaking it down like we are kind of on the podcast, is there is multiple levels. There's writing, there's directing, there's producing, there's acting on that. Is that Hayden Christensen probably nailed it the way it was supposed to be nailed. Like, he probably acted it the way the script was actually written, but it wasn't written very well. Like, it was not, like, you need to be this whiny, annoying, and he was annoying. We talked about episode 1. It made me think, oh, Anakin Skywalker is so innocent, so cute. He's going to be Darth Vader? No. And in this movie, it made me think of, no shit, he's going to come Darth Vader, because he's a tool bag. Like, he's awful. So there is that, and that's not really Hayden Christensen's fault kind of thing.
No, because like you said, he was a great whiny child. I don't know if maybe the whiny child writing was supposed to make him seem more innocent, like he's not just turning to the dark. Look at him, he's a kid. I mean, he talks like a kid. I mean, if we look at it in that lens, that's pretty excellently what Hayden Christensen pulled off, is the most annoying teenager emo, crying, whining teenager you've ever met. Like,
Which it brings me back to the Jar Jar Binks thing, with like it not
totally
being Abed Best's fault. He acted it the way George Lucas wanted him to act it, and
Yep.
now he gets crap for it. Hayden Christensen gets a bunch of crap for playing Anakin Skywalker, and hopefully, I mean, there, you know, he's going to be in ObiWan, right? I believe he's going to be in the ObiWan show, and Hayden. So, like, hopefully, there's some salvaging there, and people getting past it. The whole idea I mentioned before about Bill Buckner and the Red Sox, and like one point they came back and like cheered him and stuff like that. Like, hopefully, they get past that. Like, it's not 100% the like. No one blamed Ewan McGregor or Natalie Portman for. I mean, some people didn't like Natalie Portman as much, but like Ewan McGregor and Natalie Portman for like why the first three movies weren't everybody's favorites. Like, you know, I don't know. But what I will say is, as we get into episode 3, the next episode is there was a jump back up in sales.
Yes.
And so what it was is, I do think this was a direct connection to the fact that people didn't like episode 1 or were not happy with episode 1. So they didn't go out and see episode 2 as much, or maybe they went, the same number of people went out and saw it. They just never went and saw it a second time. Like that's what I think the first movie had, was like, well, maybe if I go see it again, I'll change my tune. This one, I think less people.
That was my experience. Like, I remember going back and seeing the first one multiple times, because like you said, there were good Easter eggs, there were little plants of things, but like I almost have, like, I remember going to Attack of the Clones only because I remember people standing and cheering when Yoda pulls out his lightsaber.
Yeah,
but I know I never went back and saw it.
It's interesting because I like to say that that's the same thing that happens nowadays with a lot of movies. Is a lot of these Marvel movies and Star Wars movies and all that stuff are always going to get multiple viewings. Our buds over at the Friends from Work podcast, they were talking about, it's kind of funny how they've grown their MCU podcast to a point where they get screeners, and so they get to see the episodes of TV shows or the movies ahead of time on their TV with like a big watermark across the river, so they can do some reviews on it. But they still go see the theaters to see it. So it's like they go see it multiple times. And it's the same thing. I saw Iron Man 1, 3, 4 times in the theaters. I think I saw Endgame 2 or 3 times in the theaters. And so like that's what eventually some of these movies, I don't think I ever went and saw, like, I don't think I saw The Notebook in theaters, but like if I went to saw The Notebook, I don't think I'd go see it again in theaters. And that's the difference between some of these pop culture style movies or these comic book related genre movies, is that a lot of these people want to go see them in the theaters 2, 3, 4 times pre-pandemic. A lot of us, like you and I, are like tiptoeing into the theaters.
Exactly.
Not going 3 or 4 times right now, but some good things about the movie. I do love some of it, like showing the magnitude of Coruscant with the size of the city, with the little the race and things through the city at the towards the beginning. It shows like they were able to do with special effects nowadays that they probably couldn't have done in the original trilogy, is because they can show these massive places that are like an entire planet, it's a city, and that's kind of cool. The funny thing about that is, though, that whole chase scene where the like slug things are climbing on
my god,
Padme, is when he jumps out the window and grabs onto the thing. I'm like, that thing has some pretty good strength to hold a full-grown male flying through the city.
Yes. That whole scene is ridiculous. And then that following scene, and where he's like, I hate when he does that, you know, leaning over the side of the car, which he just did. He just jumped out the window, like you said, and grabbed that droid. What is happening here?
And then Anakin jumps off, like he's like almost like, and he jumps off like freaking Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, smelling something going on. And obviously they have the Force and all that stuff, and I understand that. But then that's a long fall to just like land on a ship and be fine with it. And it's like, you know, Jedis, if you think about it, if you forget all other comic book related things, Jedis are superheroes in the Star Wars world. Like, obviously that makes sense, but like, I don't know, that was pretty unbelievable where he just jumped out of the thing and then landed. No ships hit him. No,
nothing. And maybe that's the thing, you know, is on that place as we try to salvage something. I mean, this movie is clearly trying to say that the Jedi are losing connection with the Force. Like things aren't, they even say like, oh, now we can't even see things. Everything's clouded. Like, so that's one of those where I think we can take that for like the larger canon. They did a good job of that in this movie, but man, just like the way they pulled it off was so sloppy. But I mean, I guess it was almost slapstick comedy in the way they did it. But if you had understood that, you would have been like, oh man, like you said, in almost every scene with the Jedi, you're like, why didn't you use the Force? I mean, like people like fist fight. Like doesn't Obi-Wan like fist fight with Jango Fett in that rainy, weird town? And it's like Batman with why don't you shoot him in the face the whole time? He's fist fighting. He can use the Force or a lightsaber. He does neither. Like,
and that's funny because like I'm a big fan of the character Spawn, and Spawn has like his powers are basically like when you're actually playing a video game and you have your bar at the top, you only have a certain amount before it regenerates to a point where you can get it. His powers are pseudo that style where it's like if you use it too much you can't have it. Or Franklin Richards in the comic books for Fantastic Four only has a finite number of powers he can use his entire lifetime, and so like whenever he uses it, he says, I need to use it the right way to do that. That's what we're understanding is that's not how the Jedis work. And the fact that you could use the Force all day long, and until you actually obviously tire yourself out, it is using a lot of energy to do it, that you could use it. So this whole Jango Fett fight or other fights, like why wouldn't, when we're playing the even the Legos Star Wars games, you can use the Force to move things and do shit. Like I don't understand it.
It's like the whole reason for the thing, man, is the Force. Like, so it is, and I had never really thought about it, but it's like it's all the time. Like you said, it's why are you jumping out the window and holding on to this? There are 1,000 different things you could have done in that situation, or like you said, Anakin jumping out. Like I mean, maybe there's some Force involved there, but it doesn't seem so. It looks like he's looking around and smelling the air.
Yes.
Like what is happening?
Oh, speaking of the jumping out the window, Adam, I don't know if you noticed later on. Like, I don't know if it's I forget now. I just remember seeing it. There's a couple of droids replacing the window.
Oh, that's cool.
On the thing. And that's like one of those things that you never really see is like things get destroyed, but you never see people cleaning them up or fixing things. And it's like, it's what you see. It's like, if you're like watching, they're like, it's like a B shot where they're like rolling up and they're showing the palette, the Padme's little area. And there's like these two flying droids replacing this circular or like half circle piece of glass. And I thought it was pretty funny. I'm like, okay, so they thought about it because they obviously jumped out the window. And did she just sleep with the window open that night, or what happened after that?
Well,
like,
right. Well, and even that, like the first, like, was it? Let's see. There's the attack. The attack on her is the little worms, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's the method you choose. Like a weird droid that drops like venomous snakes in your room. I just feel like, again, in the future, like, what don't we have like thermal detonators?
Yes.
Because they use those a lot too.
Well, we watched the Book of Boba Fett. We reviewed the Book of Boba Fett, and it's like they have full-on battles with like missiles and like and bombs and guns and all this stuff. And you send in this like, there's no real reason why they need to make it so that people don't know why she died, right? There's no like you have to poison her so people can't figure out who did it. It's like it doesn't, like, it seems like bounty hunters are killing people all over the place. So like, why do you need to, like, could you just fly up there with your thing with a rocket launcher and just blow the whole thing up? And you maybe kill a few Jedi at the time. Like,
and wasn't that what they were like just trying to do before they decided to use the little snakes? They were like chasing her around.
They blew up the ship.
They blew up the ship. Yeah, I mean, this isn't subtle at this point.
No. Like, well, other thing I think a complaint I have, and this, like I said, we love, like, just so everybody knows, Adam and I love the Star Wars universe. Like the Star Wars universe to me it's the MCU, and then like MCU, and then Star Wars is like just below that. Like that's my things. Everything else can be, I love the Ninja Turtles, and I love some DC stuff and stuff like that. But like it's basically my two big properties are Marvel, Star Wars. And so there's not like a full-on complaints. There's a lot of complaints about these movies. But what I want to say is, in the Book of Boba Fett did very little bounty hunting himself. You know what I mean? Like the Mandalorian did more bounty hunting himself than Book of Boba Fett does. And he's one of the most iconic bounty hunters you have in the Star Wars universe. It's the same thing in this one. Jango Fett was supposed to be killing Padme, right? He was hired to kill Padme, right? Is that the theory?
Yep.
He hired someone else to do it?
Yes. So Palpatine hired Dooku, and Dooku hired Jango Fett. And Jango Fett hired that person, and then that was supposed to confuse everything, I think. So, but it seems like if they'd have gone the quiet worm route first, none of that would have been necessary.
Well, I'm just laughing because I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, okay, so all these people are just subcontracting this out. So is Jango Fett an actual bounty hunter, or is he a general contractor? Like,
well, and I think you hit the nail on the head. That's part of the problem with these movies. This is partially a movie about trade negotiations and labor disputes and subcontractors and contractors and like people are building the Death Star, people are building clone armies. So my thing is, that's a great way to sum up this movie. I had so high hopes for it, but it ended up being about like weird trade disputes and about
where George Lucas thought that would
right.
be everybody's like woohoo.
Like
We
maybe
don't
he
watch
thought
CNN
like,
enough. Like
if Star Wars brought in the like construction crowd and the contractor crowd, then like their money would go up. So like, hey guys, this is about the guys who built the Death Star. But my God, that's boring.
well, maybe George Lucas watched Clerks and saw the stars or Clerks arguing about the general contractors on the Death Star, and when they blew up the Death Star, that they killed innocent people. And he's like, well, we need to make them look good in this movie.
That's going to be my new going theory for now.
And Kevin Smith is to thank for all of that.
Yes.
Oh, wait, hold on. Is Kevin Smith to thank for these 3 movies then? Oh shit.
But that would so Clerks is the one that like knew that George Lucas knew that he took a hit on the jaw on that one.
Yeah.
Like, oh man, I forgot about the workers and the laborers. I'm going to change that. Ever seen a movie about the labor department in your state?
So the other things I want to laugh about this movie, and things that, again, they're not like huge, just little nitpicky things, is Dex, the chef that ObiWan meets about the dart and stuff like that, reminds me of a character from Monsters, Inc.
Yes.
First of all, like I feel like he should have been some sort of monster scaring someone in their bedroom. A little more animation, a little more Pixar up. He would look like that. And then on top of that, the bugs in the battle scene, where they're like, first of all, why don't people just kill people?
Yep.
We've known this since the beginning of time. Any movie, when you put someone up there and chain them up and have monsters come up and kill them, they're going to escape and they're not going to die. What's the point? If you're executing someone, take a gun, shoot him in the head, get it over with. This movie would have been done midway through the movie if they just would have done that. I don't understand them.
And this obsession with like everything being like a gladiator combat scenario, like you said, like
bugs on that one reminded me of the movie friggin' Bugs Life. Like
and to go back to your original point, the dude in the diner, like back to my point about the Jedi, like that's, if we're at the point that like this cook is the only dude that knows this, what apparently is like the rarest assassin dart in the universe, but somehow the Jedi do not have a computer or anything. What does he say? Like the droids just read the symbols.
Yes.
Well, right. That's where we thought then the human counterparts, the Jedi, came in, but apparently they have no function anymore, like whatsoever.
Oh, and speaking of the dart is Jango Fett subcontracted to this other bounty hunter to kill with the bugs, but that Jango Fett was in town because obviously Jango Fett was the one that shot the bounty hunter in the neck with the dart because
he's a
he didn't get the thing
micromanager.
done. So why, if he was already there, why wouldn't he be the one that did that?
Right. I guess because he's just like that micromanaging boss. He wants to be there. But yeah, it is. I mean, I don't understand the assassination plots, the subcontracting of assassinations. I don't understand. Like, again, maybe this is the problem with the story where it's not developed. Every scene we have with the Jedi, apparently they're aware that they can't do anything anymore.
Yes.
But the rest of the movie suggests that they really can. And then the rest of the saga suggests they really can. But like you said, meanwhile, man, people are sneaking around. Nobody knows they're there.
And the other, like, so speaking of the darts, and then he goes and finds Dex and talks to Dex about it, and Dex tells him, and he goes to Camino, or finds out that Camino is probably there, but it's not on the map or whatever. That, you know, it's so someone deleted out of the system the actual planet, but didn't cover up the tracks enough to show that there's a planet there.
They they deleted the name of the file and they put it as untitled.
Yes.
That was like the level of the subterfuge that, and the kid's the one that goes, I think somebody changed the title of the file, and they're like, oh
yeah. that kid's nobody. That kid turns out to be a friggin' Jedi someday. It's warlord someday. But
probably.
So the Camino people, he goes there, and so I'm leading to believe he shows up there that he's gonna be in a big trouble because he finds out about something he's not supposed to find out about, and he's talking to them, and they're all like, oh, you didn't know about this? Well, let me tell you about this. Not like questioning who this person is,
not at all.
Why he's here. They must have believed something was askew, and they've been building these things for how many years, and someone hasn't visited them in how many years to check out how this production is going. Like that whole story of like, I understand where they're trying to go with the clones and all that stuff, and that someone was trying to build an army, knowing that something they were going to be needed one day. But it was just like Obi-Wan shows up and was just like, what's going on here? And they're like, oh, you don't know about this?
And I think that becomes one of the problems in the whole trilogy is like it starts in Phantom Menace, but there's always this like Deus Ex Machina of like, oh, it's espionage. That was always the plan. And you're like, there's no way that this man ever pulled this off because it requires accidents to happen that he could never have planned for. So I think that's where the movie often, when you're like, no, that makes no sense. They're like, but secret plan.
Yeah. It's just fascinating. And so on the positive side of going to Camino and seeing all these things, you get to meet Jango Fett in person, which is cool for all of us because, again, doing this review and talking about a discussion of episodes 1, 2, and 3 now, post Boba Fett and Mandalorian, and obviously post all the 9 movies being out, is the fact that we get to talk about some reminiscing and some throwbacks to the point where Jango Fett now plays his son Boba Fett in the Disney Plus series, which is something I never would have thought about, honestly. And this is one of the reasons why we don't make movies, Adam, or TV shows, is that someone thought, oh, wouldn't that make sense? Because he would look identical because it was an unaltered clone. Wouldn't that make sense to have the guy who played Jango Fett play Boba Fett? And I'm like, in my mind, when I heard that, I thought, oh, cool, the kid's coming back. The kid's going to play himself as an older person. And I'm like, wait, that doesn't really make any sense because the kid is supposed to look at what Jango Fett looked like as a kid. And so now the guy who plays Tamar, something, I forget his name, something Tamarin, something, whatever. I'm blanking on it. But the guy who plays Boba Fett in Boba Fett's TV show is amazing. And you get to see the iconic Boba Fett ship on the movie, on this, when they fly away and stuff like that. So it's really cool to see that stuff and see that Book of Boba Fett's out. And again, one of the reasons why we did 1, 2, and 3 during Star Wars Week at Capes and Tights is because on the 25th of May is Obi-Wan Kenobi's show. And this is kind of like the prequels to that as well. So this is one of the reasons we did these. And if we had a choice, Adam, and Boba Fett, or sorry, Obi-Wan was not coming out, we probably would be doing 4, 5, and 6 this week. But I just feel like we did this route because of the kind of a previewing what Obi-Wan's going to be doing in his TV show.
Definitely. And I just wrote on here and I was like, I think what's fun with this movie too, even tell everybody it's not that fun to watch, but you really can see now where the Disney is focusing on trying to save the storyline. And I think that's something we've talked about before. That's, if you weren't there for the prequels or you didn't watch the cartoons, you don't see that like everything happening right now is trying to save the prequels.
Yes.
It's like you said, it's bringing back not just the actor that played Jango Fett, but it also is that direct line continuity. But now you think that actor was way better than he was in the prequels, because here's the truth. He also was awful in the prequels because the direction of all of those movies is terrible. But the guy is like the legendary award-winning actor. Now that's all I think about him as.
Yes.
And now you just start seeing that they're trying to fix everything with using the cartoons as a bridge, and it's fun, but you have to see this movie to see why you would put that much effort into saving it, because it's bad.
Yes. And in this, they could do that. I mean, they did it somewhat because Jar Jar's in the Clone Wars, right? Or in Clone Wars, or is he in? I think he's in the Clone Wars. I haven't watched the Clone Wars, but we're talking about that. We're talking about eventually doing a synopsis for people so they have an idea, because it is a long thing. And it is one of those things that it's one of the things that got me stalled out on watching. I watched the first 2 or 3 episodes, was the fact that you're not your typical animation. It is a very squared, not rounded, it almost looks unfinished, but that's the style of it. And there's no problem with it, because a lot of people love that. It's just that I want to learn the stories of the Clone Wars TV show.
And even that's difficult because there's maybe over the entire series, like 20 to 25 episodes that tell you a story. And many, like you've probably fallen into the trap I have, but then you watch other ones and you're like, this has nothing to do with anything ever.
They need to make 24 episode season, and they had 4 episodes they really wanted to get done, and 20 episodes of just filler content, which is fine. Because there's a lot of shows like that where you're like, what the hell did I just watch? The annoying show where there's a cliffhanger at the end of the last episode. You're like, oh, this week I can't wait. We didn't even touch on that. What the hell? And then the next week's episode is the one that actually touches on what happened 2 episodes ago. Same thing with Clone Wars. And again, there is a breakdown. 3 different websites have them, and we're going to work on that. We're adding, I started working on it last night, just so everybody knows. So this is now May 5th when this episode comes out. So it should be already now, because we're recording this a month in advance, is a blog feature on our website, or a written word feature on the website. So Adam and I will throw some content on there. And that's one of those things that it might make more sense for us to put our list of, this is what you should watch before this, that, and the other thing, on a more blog written word featured section of the website as well. So we'll do some podcasting and we'll have that. So hopefully we'll do that between now and May 5th or Star Wars Week.
Absolutely.
Add that in there too, because maybe some of those articles will make sense then. And if we do that, it will be in the listing of this podcast. So
yeah, and that'll be fun. I think a lot of times you and I like have the conversation, and then we're like, oh man, I never thought about that. I never thought about that. So that'll be fun for the blog. We can follow up with further theories.
And there'll be some things that we miss on the episode, which makes sense to add, instead of recording again and trying to time it out like that. We'll just we'll just add it on missing pieces from episode 2 review or something like that. And so we're excited for that. That's gonna be, we're working on it. I forgot that the way I built the website, there was this option, and I was trying to figure out how to do it. And then I figured it out last night, but then I went to bed. So
how dare
we'll
you
work
sleep.
on it. Exactly. So the iconic Boba Fett ship was really cool. The return of the moisture farm was cool to a lot of us who fan that. So seeing 3PO again, the Lars family, which I'm guessing we're going to see some in Obi-Wan Kenobi is what I've heard. I will say John Williams, one of the greatest composers of all time, was able to put in, there's moments in this movie when Anakin is doing something that he shouldn't be doing, or doing something that's against the will of the Jedi, and you hear quietly in the background, dun 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 dun, and you don't hear it like it's the song playing, but you hear it like these are the moments where Anakin's having evil thoughts and selfish thoughts, and that's what they're playing in the background. I never picked it up until this rewatch, where I'm just like,
I'm glad you said it, because even in my notes here, number 1 is music. Because the music for these movies is like, it has, and that would be interesting for a future pod. It has to kind of be one of the, like, really using music as Easter eggs and suggesting what's happening and what's happened before. Because now we get that all the time, right? Every movie that comes out from Marvel, it's like, listen to the music. That was pretty wild at the time, and it was so brilliantly done. And even just to go back to the first movie for a second, one of my favorite ever is the ending of Phantom Menace, where they have the celebration parade after they save Naboo, and it's the Imperial March in a different key at a different pace, but it's in a like major note so that it's positive. And then I think it's right after the credits fade out, it transitions into the actual Imperial March. And like nobody even stuck around at the end of movies then to listen for stuff like that.
Which I have a point on. I want to make a point. It's at the, I think I have it on my notes here. I want to make a point to talk about towards the end, but I have a thing about the sticking around thing. But the music, the other thing I want to say about the music is this year at the Oscars, and I don't want to pick apart the Oscars that much, because I mean, this year was a kind of a shit show, and it has been for a number of years. And awards are a big thing. I feel like awards are kind of tainted nowadays in the first place, because I feel like people make movies to win awards now, not make a movie, and if it's badass, it wins an award. Like when you look at the Best Picture nominations for an Oscars nowadays, a lot of them are like made specifically with the whole purpose of trying to be nominated for Best Picture. Just make movies, and if your movie's badass, they will win a Best Picture award. Like, let's be honest. But the fact that they only air certain categories, we know that. No one really cares about Best Second Unit or something like that. Like, no one really gonna, like, people aren't gonna know the people when they step up the stage and make a speech. So I understand them cutting it down to the point where it's a 2-hour showable TV show. But this year they took out Best Composer off of TV. Like, they took it, they gave the award away. But they took it off of television broadcast. And to me, and a bunch of people on the internet and podcasts that let's do is, that's freaking crazy. Because take Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Back to the Future, any of these classic movies that we talk about, they wouldn't honestly be half the movies they were if it wasn't for the music that's in them. Like,
not at all.
You play the songs from these 3 movies or 3 series I just mentioned, and you know what the movie is. You should not give those people credit on television.
Well, like, use Star Wars as the example. I mean, George Lucas lucked out by getting John Williams for his first movie. If he'd have got, and you know it, there were people in that room that were like, but listen what I can do on a synthesizer, and that people wouldn't have bought it. Like the music was so good that I think people were like, this has to be better than I think it is. Right. Because as we've said, the original movie, it's fun. It's not a great dialogue written story, but the music is perfect.
Was perfect. And we're not someone who really dives into music a lot. Adam and I've actually talked about sometimes we watched an entire movie. We didn't even notice there was music in the movie.
Oh yeah.
Like there's just definitely, and there's ones that you do know. I don't notice there wasn't music. I Am Legend. The Bob Marley song is the only song in the entire movie because the idea was they want to seem empty and that there's nothing there, which makes sense. But the Friends from Work podcast I mentioned already is check them out at the FFW podcast. They're their music they do music for a living, and so they talk different instruments that are being used and all that stuff. That's a pretty cool place to go look at if you're looking at the Marvel Cinematic Universe side of it. They did do one episode on Star Wars a while back, but like just in general, they know that stuff. However, it's not just John Williams in this. Like in The Mandalorian, I think Taylor's favorite thing about the first series of The Mandalorian was the fact that Ludwig Göransson, whatever his name is, the composer, that Mandalorian music is just, when that music comes on at the end for the credits, like you're like, that's the Mandalorian. Like I picture in my head when I hear that music, the Mandalorian standing there. And now when I hear Darth Vader's, the songs play that during Darth Vader, like I picture Darth Vader. When you hear the different music, it's fascinating. And on the music front, there's two different artists. If you Google it or YouTube, Life After Death Star, which is a guy who took all of Life After Death by Biggie and mashed it up with songs from Star Wars, which is amazing. And then there's a metal group called now I can't think of the name of it, Galactic Empire, and they do metal versions with no words, obviously, but metal versions of Star Wars songs. And I love listening to those things because it's taking some of the best music I've ever heard in my entire life and changing up the genres, rap, metal, all that stuff. And that's the transcendingness of the Star Wars music. And so that's the one thing I wanted to gripe about the Oscars this year was, why wouldn't you pick out best composer? Like seriously, half these movies would be shit if it wasn't for the music.
I think that's a tremendous point, and I think why a lot of people criticize the Academy Awards. And it's funny, I was sitting here while you were talking, thinking about that, and probably, I mean, you've heard it, I'm sure. Like one of the number one descriptors you hear of Star Wars, especially the first three, but first six, is that it's a space opera. Like, and I've always like there's a reason the music is so intentional in this, is because it's called a space opera because it was very clear that it was based on an idea. I mean, look, like it's so overly hammy performative, operas are. The dialogue is terrible in operas. And if you took the music away, it would be the most ridiculous thing you've ever seen. It would be a bunch of babbling dialogue in a different language being screamed at each other with no background music, which my point of that is that imagine, the second movie, Attack of Clones, with no music. Oh my God. It would be like a bad comedy with no laugh track, So like,
exactly. And that's so like the music in this movie is one of those ones I think that stood out. I mean, obviously in the original three, it does stand out a lot because that's when you first hear it and first like get introduced to the fanfare for Star Wars and all that stuff. Like you end up hearing that. But this movie, again, like I think it's like one of those things. It's not just the music itself; it's the music using it in the right time. Because you could easily, I mean, you and I could create a movie and just put music on in the background. Cool. But it's the idea that you were like, okay, the thought process behind Anakin's doing something he shouldn't be doing. So we're going to slightly add in a different version. So like overlaying it with other music, the music that is around when Darth Vader is around in the original three movies. And it's like, okay, that makes more sense because he's going to become Darth Vader. So it's foreshadowing. And the funny thing is because it's foreshadowing because these are prequels, but this came out afterwards. So they're able to use the impact of the first three movies in this movie to foreshadow the movies again. I think it's fascinating.
That's why the categories you've mentioned are just so important. Because I mean, like what we're saying, I think is that the story narrative of Attack of the Clones was not good. The music narrative, I mean, for what it was, might be one of the best ever. It might be what has started the whole thing of how modern, music is used in film. And so I think that's, we said at the beginning, kind of what's a good takeaway. The music is amazing.
Yeah, and that's something we can say about all of them, which is so here's the deal. The music was amazing, so everything else is lacking on the music. But again, a nostalgia thing to see is we saw the plans, the Death Star again. it's more to some people it's more fan service who have never seen Star Wars and they're watching it 1 through 9. It's more like you're like, you don't care. To that moment in that movie means jack shit to a lot of people because if you haven't seen it, because it's just a picture of a floating planet. So you don't know that it eventually becomes this big feature in multiple movies over the time, which is just cool to see that. Anakin's transformation is cool. Like I like to see him going, but like, and when Padme falls, when they're flying and they're chasing after him, after Count Dooku, and he said Anakin wants to turn around and stop the fight to save the woman that he loves. Shows his start to be more selfish and think about himself. And not like he's not trying to save Padme for Padme. He's trying to save Padme for himself. And the fact that Jedis are supposed to be more thinking about the broader good and not themselves. Was cool.
And they're supposed to be celibate.
Yes, they are. Weird. We wouldn't get Luke though. So
exactly.
Let's talk a little bit before we finish up here, because I think we can probably roll it up. No, I guess we got a little time, but like, is Yoda.
Yeah.
So when you talk the first movie, we talked about it a lot. A lot of people were kind of upset with the use of CGI in the first movie.
Yes.
And that there was a lot of CGI in that movie. And then you come back and you have the opportunity to introduce Yoda again into the series in a point where he's actually like doing something other than just sitting on a chair.
Right.
And it's 100% CGI. Like there is no Yoda in this movie that's an actual physical puppet. It's 100% CGI'd. Here's the question though, Adam. If it was made in order, and episode 1 came out in 1999, this one came out in 2002, and then so on and so on. And then 9 movies went from there. Would Yoda have been CGI'd the entire time?
Oh, man.
I believe it would have. I think that he's such a creature that they could have created. They needed to create in a certain way.
Probably.
That there was no reason for them to make a puppet, especially if he does the actions once he's using when he's using the Force power to make it so that he like it is a funny thing to a lot of people who don't understand that the Force is making him fight, like helping him fight.
Yes, exactly.
This guy walking around with a cane all of a sudden now can do flips and backflips and shit like that. But obviously it's the Force that's helping him do that.
Of course.
He's not going to use the Force the entire time on the thing. It's the same thing if anybody has listened to it a few weeks back. Paulie and I, since recording this, we haven't recorded yet, but we will be, is talking Doctor Strange and the fact that Doctor Strange could have fixed his hands with using his abilities and his magical powers. But he'd have to focus on and do that instead of saving people. So Yoda uses his knowledge most of his time and then uses his Force powers when he needs to help him fight. But I think that he would have been CGI. I think he would have been CGI the entire time, like like Jar Jar Binks. He would have been CGI because it would have been saving money and it would have been easier.
It would, and the first attempt where they used a puppet was awful. I mean, it was so bad, which is really interesting too, because I mean, how did they lose the technology from the first Yoda and then not even manage to make him the first puppet they tried and look like him? I mean, it was wild. And while we're on the Yoda subject, one of my favorite things, there's a lady Yoda in one of these movies that's on the Jedi Council. And I can't remember if it's Phantom Menace or Revenge of the Sith. But when you bring up Yoda, one of my favorites is we always act like there's just Yoda out there. And clearly there was this lady Yoda that was friends with him. So I think I want to know more about the lady Yoda too.
And that's one of the things we get with this Disney's Plus thing. Can we get a Yoda story, which would be amazing? Just a straight on Yoda story with like Yoda, like not small as Grogu or Baby Yoda, but like in between that year, like Yoda's obviously hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years old, whereas Grogu is only what they say, like 50 something years old. And so like that in between there and figuring out the whole thing and his species and learn a little bit more about that, like that stuff to me is like easy to touch. You won't have to worry about touching anything else because there hasn't even been a comic book about that. Like, no, think about that. Like, you'd think that they would do that by now. Yoda is a character that you could reintroduce to people, and Baby Yoda has brought people back into looking at someone with big green with big ears.
Maybe Grogu will find out that he's cloned from Yoda. And then when he gets his own series, he'll go try to find out about Yoda. And then we'll get all the mysteries.
The Yoda Clone Wars, because there's like clones of Yoda, but like a whole battle, like a whole army.
While we're on that, why would you clone this weird bounty hunter to be your clone army instead of cloning Yoda to be your army? Because a little tiny army of Yodas, it would have been done. But no, I found this guy. I hired him off of Craigslist. He's a bounty hunter. He's pretty good at what he does. Let's clone him.
Well, here's the thought: is you have to have someone with suspect morals.
Yes.
To have them, so they're allowing someone to clone them. Also, with a humongous ego.
Yeah.
That you're like, hey, by the way, and you think about it, it's kind of crazy to think about it, that thought process that if you say you were single, Adam, you were just by yourself, and you're like, I've always wanted a kid, but I just haven't had a kid yet, and you have this opportunity to become cloned, you probably would ask for an unaltered clone for yourself so that you have it. But in the same sense, I'm like, that's weird because it's a mini you. Like my son's a mini me, but he's not. He's gonna have his own personality, his own way of talking, his own like it's his own self. He's not a physical clone of me. It's not like when he grows up, we're gonna looking in the mirror. It's creepy to me that Boba Fett is that character. It's just that I understand your whole thing, but like this really weird random dude who's a bounty hunter. It's not even like you could get someone from like that's like on the Galactic Council or some sort of like
or even if you're doing this, I mean, we've all seen the Star Wars galaxy. There's gotta be a million better people out there with bad morals even than Boba Fett, because actually until we get our new shows, he's a terrible bounty hunter.
Yes.
He's awful. He fails at everything he does.
And if you read the comic books, he fails even more. Like there's the comic books that are putting out right now by Charles Soule at Marvel Star Wars. It's between when Boba Fett or Han Solo goes into Carbonite and when he ends up at what the hell is his name?
Jabba the Hutt.
Jabba the Hutt. Jesus. Yep. Jabba the Hutt's palace. It's between then and actually, so Boba Fett helps deliver him to Boba Fett or Jabba the Hutt. But there's a time in the middle there, according to the comic books, that he lost him, that he actually didn't have possession of him. So he even like was able to like supposed to move him from point A to point B, and he lost him in the meantime. So he's a horrible bounty hunter in that sense. So, and as you see on the show, he's not that good. Yep. He hires other people to do it. But
which would explain why they all miss when they shoot and why that becomes a whole thing into the stormtroopers later. It's just they started with junky code, it just keeps getting worse.
Speaking of that, I have fun facts to talk about, and that is a perfect one. Senator Amidala, or Padme, is the best shot other than Princess Leia. She almost never misses, and this is a reference to her daughter, Leia, who also almost never misses.
Yep.
That's a pretty fun one.
Maybe Padme had some force powers. Maybe that's why she was so attracted to dirty little Anakin.
Oh, I don't know. The whole
I had to say that. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. The movie. So here's the thing, thought process on this thing is I've always, and we've talked about this, about how we like to watch things that have multiple universe things so we can watch everything involved in it. The movie didn't leave me wanting a third movie, if that makes any sense.
No,
absolutely. I wanted to know how Star Wars got Darth Vader. So that's the only reason. That's because I saw the original trilogy. The original trilogy didn't exist. I don't know if I would have given two craps about what Anakin's life would have been after this movie. And that's part of the writing in the story. And that's part of the reason why I'm a defender of George Lucas. I think he created a world that is one of the best worlds and universes in the entire history. But he had some misses, and that's fine. Marvel created the Incredible Hulk. They created Thor: Dark World. We understand there are times where movies are 100% misses on things. And I think the majority of this movie was a miss to me.
Yeah, I agree.
But I think in the end, now that we've seen the prequels, it's like, okay, I don't want to see that gap between how Anakin finished this movie with marrying Padme to. That's the other thing is, why did they have to get married?
Well, that's why I said I didn't know if I wanted to step into that whole relationship thing. But yeah, there's not a single part of that storyline that makes any sense. They already
were pregnant with a child.
Right.
So what was the point of okay, you're not supposed to have a relationship with someone. So not only are we gonna have this secret relationship, we're gonna have the secret relationship, which is governed by a marriage certificate. And
then also, how does I guess they're hiding the marriage, but none of the Jedis are able to sense that he's now married and having sex, which is one of the main tenets of things he's not supposed to do.
Correct.
And then I don't think we'll ever get past that. It's the creepiest relationship you'll ever see on screen, because I don't know who's more of the predator.
Yes. Which it makes a little bit more sense if they had skipped episode 1.
Yes.
And gone to this, because they basically didn't age up Padme and they drastically aged up Anakin. Yes. So Anakin sped up his age. So now if you met Padme and Anakin in this movie for the first time, you would just assume they're trying to tell us that they're 4 or 5 years apart.
Exactly.
Right. But if you saw basically the one where like Padme would be his babysitter.
Yep.
And now they're married and have kids and all that stuff. Yeah. And that's a decision that George Lucas made. It's not like it's like a history thing where like basically something off the truth. This is a casting decision.
Here's a George Lucas, great, like you said, moment. And it's George Lucas wrote it and then made Hayden Christensen say it, which is I'm haunted by the thought of the kiss you never should have given me. No one should have written that line. It should have gone through no level of editing that line should have continued. And you never, ever should have given it to a person that you hired whose career is going to be based on this. I mean, it's so bad.
I don't understand it, but again, the whole relationship thing, and it makes sense. Is Padme part to blame for him becoming Darth Vader?
I think so.
Because
that's why I said
she knew he wasn't supposed to be doing this, but still let him do it. Like I would hope to feel like that my wife would say, if I wasn't supposed to get married and have a kid because of whatever religion, technically they say it's a religion, right? I mean, being a Jedi is it's like a priest not getting married in
there you
the
go.
Catholic
Yeah,
Church.
exactly.
Like, wouldn't, if I was a priest and I met Taylor, wouldn't she I'd hope as a normal upright standing person in this universe would say, no, Justin, you cannot do that because of your beliefs. Yet she allowed it to happen. She allowed them to have sex. They allowed them to have babies and get married and all this stuff. It's like,
with your priest analogy, I mean, that's perfect because it's like, okay, fine. Like the priest guy, he decides to have sex, but he can't be a priest now, right? Because that's one of the rules. Mm-hmm. But she knew that, except that the problem with Padme's character is she really likes the fact that he's a priest.
Yes.
So she's knowingly doing the one thing that's going to get him kicked out. So yeah, like you said, I mean, she's clearly to blame. I mean, she's a horrible decision maker.
It's just fascinating. And she was like running things. Like she's a politician. There you go. That's why it was like that. She didn't give a shit. She's a politician.
And maybe that's it. But I mean, oh my God, I hate sand. It's coarse and everywhere, but that's not like you. You're smooth. And now that's the line where she's like, oh, take me, Annie, take me.
I bet your wife likes that. Take me.
That's
Annie.
why. Did you hear me when I said Annie before I went Annie Kin? That's weird. That's weird when I say Annie. I'm never saying that again.
It's a weird thing, and it grows and it grows and it grows, and then it becomes even more weird when in episodes 4, 5, and 6 when George has his sister and brother kiss. Like that's okay. So like that's the thing you could have avoided. Was not necessary. There's nothing. I mean, obviously you could have this tension of them wanting to like each other because they don't know. We can talk about that when we get to that movie, but like, you didn't need to have them kiss. Like,
I mean, was it poor writing or is there a deeper pathology there? Because at every instance by the same writer, I see stories of incest being like right up at the top of the list. Hey, we should do this really cool thing about the Sith. We could, but I got this incest idea. So like, and maybe.
Well, I mean, I guess we're talking about this, but like. There's Game of Thrones out there too. So
exactly.
So like,
and let me clarify that, like, I'm joking. I don't think the problem with George Lucas was that there was no plan for the writing, but it is a little weird.
But the other part about it is that he made 4, 5, and 6, and then he made these movies. So he could have learned from a mistake from 4, 5, and 6 about having his siblings kiss
instead of doubling down
and going, "Hey, you saw me have siblings kiss. Let me have an older person start hitting on a younger person and see what happens."
Who began grooming him when he was 6 years old and she was 14.
Yes. Like, oh God,
this is the story of it's gross.
So at the end of this, should we retitle all these movies? Star Wars Episode 2, The Predator.
Yes. Oh God, this is a story of child grooming and pedophilia and entrapment. Now I'm just going to be sad.
But the question I had earlier that I wanted to talk about right now before we finish up is, in the world we live in with MCU films, and now there's 27, 28 of those, and the post-credit scene, do you think that these 3 movies would have had post-credit scenes if they were made today?
Like 14 of them.
I think it would have been great. I think it would have made me go, oh my gosh, and stay in the theater. So you watch the whole awarding of the thing at the end of episode 1. You're seeing all that stuff. And then they give you a glimpse of like Hayden Christensen being cast, like I'm sure they had him already cast, and at least talks having about Hayden Christensen being Anakin as an older person and having this whole transition of things, having these funny things, or either a funny thing or a serious thing that give you like, oh my God, I gotta see episode 2, I gotta see episode 3. And I think we would have had that.
Oh, I think George Lucas probably kicked himself the first time somebody else did that, because I feel like George Lucas would put credits in the middle of the movie just to have another opportunity to do after credit scenes.
He would have started the encore. It wouldn't have been a post credit scene. It would have been encore.
The crawling text is actually credits, and it starts there.
Yeah. Well, it would have been like, oh, you think we're done? Here's the credits, and then there's another 20 minutes of the movie, not just like a 3-minute like credit. That post credit scene would have been another 20 minutes of writing. But it would have been great. And then at the end of episode 3 would have been great because you could have done a post credit scene that led into episode 4, even though episode 4 everybody knows is coming. Like it's like
which would have been like brilliant. Yes.
It would have been like a thing. You're like, oh, obviously I know Chewie's gonna do this with Han Solo and all this crap. Like you would have seen that coming, but it would have been like, oh wait, that is kind of cool because they gave you a post-credit scene that doesn't, and then they didn't even do it in the new Star Wars movies, right? I mean, I don't think I'm surprised because I'm like, that seems like the genre that you do it with. Yeah. You're not gonna do it again, I mentioned the Notebook earlier. You're not gonna do it in a Notebook style movie. Nope. You're gonna, it's only in these style movies. But I feel like the post-credit scene is sometimes overused, and now they're doing the mid-credit and post-credit. And we mentioned the Spider-Man one where it was like the second post-credit, the mid-credit was good. The post-credit was just a trailer. So like, I don't understand that one, but like, if it makes sense to do it and to put questioning in people's mind, like what the how's it happen next episode? That was cool to me. So I wish they would have done that with Star Wars.
I feel like if George Lucas had done end credit scenes, he would have just introduced 5 different toys in every that would have been
the post-credit scene would have been the characters fighting as action figures. You'd be like, oh, look at this, Anakin Skywalker.
And it's George Lucas doing it like Spaceballs. Oh, man.
That would have been great.
We've come full circle to Spaceballs, man.
Exactly. There you go. So don't ever let someone watch Spaceballs before they see Star Wars, because all they'll think is Star Wars is an unfunny version of Spaceballs. Yes. So we finished last episode with some fun facts. I'm going to go rattle off a couple of fun facts here. When Anakin Skywalker, Anakin is slaughtering the Tusken Raiders, Qui-Gon's voice is actually being heard in the background. This is not an accident. According to Star Wars canon, he is the Force ghost that tries to stop Anakin's rage, but failed, which is kind of cool.
Pretty cool.
Just before Anakin goes on the search for his mother on Tatooine, he has a conversation with Senator Amidala. The camera pans and shows the shadows as they talk. Anakin's shadow resembles Darth Vader, but according to the DVD commentary, it's a Vader-like shadow is not on purpose. It was just a coincidence.
Ooh.
That's creepy to me because I'm like, that's like the actual Force is looking at that.
Yes.
When Jango Fett gets into his ship after the fight with ObiWan, he bangs his head on a partially open door. This was intentional and is a reference to the famous scoop from Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope in 1977, where the stormtrooper accidentally bangs his head on the door. That's what I thought we talked about last episode, which was awesome. That they actually did that. And that's a funny reference. That's one of those things where I'm like,
those are the great ones where like,
I bet they did it and didn't even tell like George, like they kept it in there and didn't even tell George because George would have been like, no, that's my mistake. I can't have that happen. But yeah.
Or he's just smart enough to lean into his mistakes. I say that, but then we just watched Attack of the Clones, and I'm not really sure what he's leaning into. So,
on the lightsaber aspect, there is no mythical significance to Mace Windu's lightsaber. Samuel L. Jackson's favorite color is purple, and that's why he thought it'd be cool. That's all it is. Hayden Christensen is the only actor in Star Wars movie history who didn't get to choose his design of his lightsaber.
Ooh.
It's because Christensen was stuck with the one that's being used in Episode 4.
Of course,
right. It's not the exact same one, but it's very similar to that one. And because he becomes a character that's in that movie, they had to use that same lightsaber. Like Ewan McGregor did in Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, Hayden Christensen's made lightsaber noises the first time he held one. After chuckling with the young stars, George Lucas informed him they probably had people in sound effects who could do a better job in post-production. That would be awesome if you're just sitting there going, pew, pew, pew. I would do it. Like,
of course.
The only Star Wars movie where a camera shot tilts up after the opening scroll of the scene. The rest of them actually scroll down. There's no significance to that. I'm guessing it was just an oversight, in my opinion.
But probably because afterwards they were like, man, the one time we tried panning up, the whole movie fell apart. So yeah, don't ever pan up again.
According to the animation director, Rob Coleman, not a single clone trooper suit was ever actually built. Every clone trooper in this film was computer generated.
Which is kind of cool and on the nose for them being clones. But
that wants me to finish up with the CGI conversation. And if anybody was watching Moon Knight now, or the Moon Knight's over now by the time we talk about this, or no, it's ending over the next few weeks.
Yep.
But we have now, since this episode's recorded, been able to watch 1 or 2 episodes, and the CGI was a conversation in some people's episodes. And it's great. There's no problem with Noah. So they just brought up on the Friends from Work podcast I listened to this week. They talked about how they hope it doesn't trend to movies, TV shows, things relying too much on CGI when it's not necessary.
Right.
And so what we mainly are speaking about in this movie, it showed up a bunch of times, was when Count Dooku's walking across in that like rock formation with all the bugs before the battles of the execution style thing. Was that it looks like he's someone in a 5th grade class put a green screen behind him and made him walk. I think CGI stormtroopers, CGI clone troopers, CGI bugs, animals, and in the fight scene between Dooku and Yoda are necessary because you can't tell. They're mythical creatures. Like the mythical things are not really there. So they can look somewhat CGI because that could be what they look like in real life.
Exactly.
They don't have to look that. But background sceneries, when you don't have to have them be that way. And the biggest complaint was on Hawkeye. At the end of the season, they're standing on a bridge and they're looking out at like the city. And that is not really them looking out on the bridge. It's CGI. And like why that needs to be done. They film on set all the time. Why can't they just any time during the entire filming, they could have filmed that one scene of them doing that and had a real life actual picture. And it's gotten better now. We've talked about it a little bit. Is in The Mandalorian, they use that big screen where they actually project something on the screen. They're walking in front of it. So there's less CGI and more practical / special effects in that. But I don't have a problem with them using CGI to create clone troopers. Like it makes more sense. It's cheaper. They do a good job when you see the big upscale of all them standing, that they don't actually put them in perfect lines. Like they actually make them look a little off. So like they're not standing like you thought there were thousands of people. But it's necessary and sometimes.
One, I mean, like we said in the previous episode, but let's put this movie in its time too. Like nothing with CGI has ever been done anything like Attack of the Clones. I mean, Attack of the Clones is like Phantom Menace on steroids. And so like while there's so much of it that is shaky, I feel like nobody else had done it. Right. So Star Wars did it. And so as much as it actually didn't work well, I think film in general learned a lot of lessons of like, CGI is cheaper, but people's brains just don't like it. So,
and there's a balance. There's a mixture. There's a place where you can do it and a place, where you don't need to do it. And I think that if you and I are having a conversation and that's all it is, we're in a room, it's you and me, there's no reason for you to be CGI. If we're having a battle scene where you're like, this suit might not work this way, it's not going to work very well, then obviously it can be CGI. Or if you're trying to produce an entire stand full of people, like your pod racing, like that doesn't have, you don't have to get 1,000 extras to do this. Multiply people, do some editing and all that stuff. It makes sense to fill in the gaps, to add the lightsaber effect, to do all that stuff. You kind of need that. But there's times where if you can practically do it, one of the biggest pluses to Jurassic Park is the practical effects mixed with special effects in those movies were almost perfect in my opinion. I could think it's like the best they've ever done. They actually use a real T-Rex head. Like a real T-Rex. They have used a practical effects head.
It was a real T-Rex.
And they use special effects to finish out the rest of the stuff and so on. Like it makes sense to me when the same thing with these ones, like Yoda being practical when he's sitting at the council, like sitting there or talking to Mace Windu. It would have made more sense for him to be an actual practical effect versus a CGI one. I just feel like he looked CGI in moments where he didn't.
And where
CGI.
Where I say we can see now with Disney how I think they've finally found this kind of balance is, where in the recent episodes of Book of Boba Fett, but Luke is of course fully CGI. And so they make Yoda a practical effect always. And so that balance works. Like you said, like I'm okay with the CGI Luke because Yoda's not CGI.
Correct.
But that's one of the few instances where, like you said, the other times CGI would be perfect for
Yes.
Yoda. But like in that instance, Disney knew exactly how to do that scene to make it work.
So there's a balance there. And I think George is not to blame for this because, again, I think in the early 2000s, when you have the ability to use this modern technology that no one else is using in movies as much as he was, why wouldn't you use it? Well, your price is going to go down in your film. You're going to be able to do things you shouldn't be able to do. And it makes more sense to do them this way. But there's a balance. I feel like you already have a Yoda costume somewhere, and someone can make a Yoda, make it look good. It's obviously, you're not going to have, what's his name? Frank, is it Frank Oz? Yeah, you're not going to have him in this, like just running around doing things or something. Obviously, he does the.
But I think you're right, and I kind of our full circle as we're getting near to the end is that, you know, if you look for positive things in this, it may be really hard at times to watch the CGI, but understand that this is it. This is the movie that like launches. I mean, CGI was out there. This becomes a whole other thing. Isn't this also one of the first 2 digital releases?
Yes.
So like it's massive, and maybe the writing and the acting and the directing fell away a bit, but the tech side of it was really bold and really innovative because nobody else would do that.
Mm-hmm. And this does say something to the idea that you don't, if you're a movie creator, like Kevin Smith has talked about, like he sometimes now writes movies, but doesn't direct or produce them because he is focusing on one thing or the other. I do feel like there's something to be said about picking an alley and doing it. And the same thing with my favorite comic book artist is Scotty Young, and he has a new comic book coming out too. And he was started out as an artist. He became a writer. He's writing this and letting someone else draw it because he realizes that one of the 2 things is going to slack if he does both of them. And so George Lucas is one of those things is that like maybe he should have. I think the theory was that he wasn't supposed to direct all these, that he was trying to find directors for these movies, and that no one really wanted to touch them. Exactly. And ruin them and be that person. And so George Lucas ended up doing it. And the whole time he's like, oh, I was going to do it the whole time, which I think is BS. But I do too. Maybe he should have focused on the writing part of it and not the directing part. Let the 2 mix together, or have a writing team, him and some other people. And maybe they would have turned out a little bit different.
And but like you said, if you've watched the documentaries, it seems like he felt like that too in the beginning. So,
but yeah, that's episode 2 of. It's so weird to say this because we call every one of our episodes, and this is episode 2. So this is the Attack of the Clones.
Yes.
Which is cool. I do like how they added the name of the actual films to things. Like obviously Star Wars is Star Wars, but it is also called A New Hope now. They kind of there wasn't part when the original filming came up the screens. It just said Star Wars, but it's A New Hope now. And this was Attack of the Clones. Last one was Phantom Menace. The next is Revenge of the Sith. We'll see how that goes, right?
We will. So yeah, my recommendation on this movie is there's edited versions of it on YouTube that make it way shorter. Watch those. Yes.
Which is kind of funny. We mentioned I listened that the new Doctor Strange. Actually, when this hits tomorrow, and it's 2 hours and 4 minutes long, Adam. How a movie made in post 2020
that's crazy.
Is just around 2 hours.
I know.
It's fascinating to me because every other movie seems to be now 2 hours and 45 minutes or 3 hours long.
Oh, it absolutely is. I was going to say the fact that we've been pushed enough to say that a little over 2 hours is short shows you how out of control it is. Because I'm like you, 90-minute movie, man.
Yes, 90 minutes to hour and 45 minutes. Perfect.
Exactly.
Give me enough time to sit down. I can go 2 hours without taking a pee.
Yep.
Let's make this happen in the future. But so again, Star Wars to me is always, I'm going to watch this movie over and over and over and over again. It's just, and it's because of the name. I feel like if this didn't have the name attached to it, it might be one of those movies that were watched once and forgotten about. So,
in this one, you just watch it, make fun of it, have fun.
So episode 3 is next. And then this is Star Wars week. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, all those things. And I don't know. May the force be with you, Adam.
And also with you.